Section 1. You will hear a student talking to a housing officer about living with a homestay family. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Yes, what can I do for you?
My friend is in homestay, and she really enjoys it, so I'd like to join a family as well.
Okay, so let me get some details. What's your name?
My name is Keiko Yuchini.
Could you spell your family name for me?
It's Yuchini. That's Y-U-I-C-H-I-N-I.
The student's surname is Uichini, so Uichini has been written on the form. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Yes, what can I do for you?
My friend is in homestay, and she really enjoys it, so I'd like to join a family as well.
Okay, so let me get some details. What's your name?
My name is Keiko Yuchini.
Could you spell your family name for me?
It's Yuchini. That's Y-U-I-C-H-I-N-I.
And your first name?
It's Keiko. K-E-I-K-O.
That's Keiko Yuchini. Okay, and you're female. And your nationality?
I'm Japanese.
Right. And could I see your passport, please?
Here it is.
Okay, your passport number is JO6337. And you're how old?
I'm 28 years old.
Now, you live at one of the colleges. Which one?
Willow College, room 21C.
Right, 21C Willow College. And how long are you planning on staying with Homestay?
About 4 months. Longer if I like it.
And what course are you enrolled in?
Well, I've enrolled for 20 weeks in the, Advanced English Studies because I need help with my writing. And I'm nearly at the end of my first 5-week course.
Okay. Do you have any preference for a family with children or without children?
I like young children, but I'd like to be with older people. You know, adults, someone around my age.
Okay. And what about pets?
I am a veterinarian, so that's fine. The more the better.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
All right. Now, what about you? Are you a vegetarian or do you have any special food requirements?
No, I am not a vegetarian, but I don't eat a lot of meat. I really like seafood.
And what are your hobbies?
I like reading and going to the movies.
Do you play any sports?
Yes, I joined the handball team, but I didn't like that, so I stopped playing. Now I play tennis on the weekend with my friends.
All right. Let's see. Name, age, now the location. Are you familiar with the public transport system?
No, I'm not really because I have been living on campus. I've been to the city a few times on the bus, but they are always late.
What about the trains?
I like catching the train. They are much faster.
Now, let me go check on the computer and see who I've got. Listen, leave it with me. I'll check my records and I'll give you details this afternoon.
Thank you for helping me.
It's a pleasure. Bye.
Bye.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 2. Section 2. You will hear a guide giving a tour of a park. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
Welcome to all of you. Can everybody see and hear me? Good. I'm Sally, your guide for this tour of the Bicentennial Park. I hope that you're all wearing your most comfortable shoes and that you can keep up the pace. So, let's get underway on our tour around this wonderful park. I'll start today with some general background information. There used to be a lot of factories in this area until the 1960s. Creating the park required the demolition of lots of derelict buildings on the site, so most of the exciting park space all around you was originally warehouses and storehouses. The idea of building a public park here was first discussed when a property developer proposed a high-rise housing development, but the local community wasn't happy. If the land was to be cleaned up, they wanted to use the site for recreation. Residents wanted open space for outdoor activities rather than housing or even an indoor sports complex. Now, to the Bicentennial Park itself. It has two areas, a nature reserve and a formal park with man-made features and gardens. The tall blue and white building in front of us is called the Tower and is the centre point for the formal gardens. It stands 12 metres high, so follow me up the stairs to where we can take advantage of the fantastic views.
Before you hear the rest of the tour, you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
Well, here we are at the top of the tower, and we're going to look at the view from each direction, out To the east, the large buildings about 1 kilometre away are on the Olympic site. There's an indoor arena for gymnastics, a stadium for track and field, and a swimming pool for races and synchronised swimming, and also diving. If you look carefully down there, you can see the train lines. The Olympic site has its own station to encourage the use of public transport. There is also a car park, but it only holds a limited number of cars. The formal park has some specially created water features. If you look out here to the south, you can see a circular ornamental pond. And around to the west, you can relax and sit on a bench to smell the flowers in the rose garden. And finally, up to the north, if you look in front of you now, there's a lake with a small island in the centre. You can hire rowing boats at the boat shed, which you can't see from here. But if you look through the trees, you can see the cafe, which has lovely views across the water. OK, let's climb down now. We will go now and have a look at the nature reserve section of the park, which has opened up natural wetland to the public. The mangroves have been made more accessible to visitors by the boardwalk built during the park's upgrade. You'd think that people would come here to look at the unusual plant life of the area, but in fact it's more often used for cycling and is very popular with the local clubs. This is the far end of the park, and over there you can see the frog pond, a natural feature here long before the park was designed. Just next to it we have our outdoor classroom, a favourite spot for school parties. The area is now most often used by primary schools for biology lessons. And finally, let's pass by the waterbird refuge. This area is in a sheltered part of the estuary. That's why the park's viewing shelter is a favourite spot for bird watchers who can use it to spy through binoculars. You can watch a variety of waterbirds, but most visitors expect to see black swans when they come to the shelter. You might spot one yourself right now. Well, here we are back at our starting point, the Visitors Centre.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 3.
Section 3. You will hear a student called Rob, who is in the first year of a theatre studies course, talking to another student called Mia, who's in the 4th year of the same course. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Hi, Rob. How's the course going?
Oh, hi, Mia. Yeah, great. I can't believe the first term's nearly over.
I saw your group's performance last night at the student theatre. It was good.
Really? Yeah, but now we have to write a report on the whole thing, an in-depth analysis. I don't know where to start. Like, I have to write about the role I played, the doctor, how I developed the character.
Well, what was your starting point?
My grandfather was a doctor before he retired, and I just based it on him.
Okay, but how? Did you talk to him about it?
He must have all sorts of stories, but he never says much about his work, even now. He has a sort of authority, though.
So how did you manage to capture that?
I'd visualise what he must have been like in the past when he was sitting in his consulting room listening to his patients.
OK, so that's what you explain in your report.
Right.
Then there's the issue of atmosphere. So in the first scene we needed to know how boring life was in the doctor's village in the 1950s. So when the curtain went up on the first scene in the waiting room, there was that long silence before anyone spoke. And then people kept saying the same thing over and over, like, cold, isn't it?
Yes, and everyone wore grey and brown and just sat in a row.
Yes, all those details of the production.
And I have to analyse how I functioned in the group, what I found out about myself. I know I was so frustrated at times when we couldn't agree.
Yes. So did one person emerge as the leader?
Sophia did. That was okay. She helped us work out exactly what to do for the production, and that made me feel better, I suppose.
When you understood what needed doing?
Yes. And Sophia did some research too. That was useful in developing our approach.
Like what?
Well, she found these articles from the 1950s about how relationships between children and their parents, or between the public and people like bank managers or the police, were shifting.
Interesting. And did you have any practical problems to overcome?
Well, in the final rehearsal, everything was going fine until the last scene. That's where the doctor's first patient appears on stage on his own.
The one in the wheelchair?
Yes, and he had this really long speech with the stage all dark except for one spotlight. And then that stuck somehow, so it was shining on the wrong side of the stage. But anyway, we got that fixed, thank goodness.
Yes, it was fine on the night.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
But while you're here, Mia, I wanted to ask you about the year abroad option. Would you recommend doing that?
Yes, definitely. It's a fantastic chance to study in another country for a year.
I think I'd like to do it, but it looks very competitive. There's only a limited number of places.
Yes. So, next year, when you're in the second year of the course, you need to work really hard in all your theatre studies modules. Only students with good marks get places. You have to prove that you know your subject really well.
Right. So how did you choose where to go?
Well, I decided I wanted a programme that would fit in with what I wanted to do after I graduate. So I looked for a university with emphasis on acting rather than directing, for example. It depends on you. Then about 6 months before you go, you have to email the scheme coordinator with your top 3 choices. I had a friend who missed the deadline and didn't get her first choice, so you do need to get a move on at that stage. You'll find that certain places are very popular with everyone.
And don't you have to write a personal statement at that stage?
Yes.
Right. I'll get some of the final year students to give me some tips. Maybe see if I can read what they wrote.
I think that's a very good idea. I don't mind showing you what I did. And while you're abroad, don't make the mistake I made. I got so involved I forgot all about making arrangements for when I came back here for the final year. Make sure you stay in touch so they know your choices for the optional modules. You don't want to miss out doing your preferred specialisms.
Right.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to Section 4. Section 4. You will hear part of a lecture about leadership introducing a theory called self-regulatory focus theory. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Today, I want to talk about self-regulatory focus theory and how the actions of leaders can affect the way followers approach different situations. Self-regulatory focus theory is a theory developed by Torrey Higgins. He says that a person's focus at any given time is to either approach pleasure or avoid pain. These are two basic motivations that each and every one of us has, and they cause us to have different kinds of goals. Promotion goals in different life situations emphasize achievement. Prevention goals are oriented towards the avoidance of punishment. In a specific situation, our thoughts might focus more on promotion goals or more on prevention goals. The theory suggests that two factors affect which goals we are focusing on. First, there is a chronic factor. This factor is connected to a person's personality and says that each person has a basic tendency to either focus more on promotion goals or focus more on prevention goals as part of his or her personality. Second, there is a situational factor, which means that the context we are in can make us more likely to focus on one set of goals or the other. For example, we are more likely to be thinking about pleasure and to have promotion goals when we are spending time with a friend. In contrast, if we are working on an important project for our boss, we are more likely to try to avoid making mistakes and therefore have more prevention goals in our mind. Research has shown that the goals we are focusing on at a given time affect the way we think. For example, when focusing on promotion goals, people consider their ideal self, their aspirations and gains. They don't think about what they can lose, so they think in a happier mode. They feel more inspired to change. When people are focusing on prevention goals, they think about their ought self. What are they supposed to be? What are people expecting from them? They consider their obligations to others. As a result, they experience more anxiety and try to avoid situations where they could lose. Now that I have talked about the two focuses and how they affect people, I want to look at the idea that the way leaders behave, or their style of leading, can affect the focus that followers adopt in a specific situation. In talking about leadership, we often mention transformational leaders and transactional leaders. Transformational leaders, when interacting with their followers, focus on their development. In their words and actions, transformational leaders highlight change. Their speech is passionate and conveys a definitive vision. All of these things can encourage followers to think about what could be. In other words, they inspire a promotion focus in their followers. In contrast, transactional leaders focus on developing clear structures that tell their followers exactly what is expected of them. While they do explain the rewards people will get for following orders, they emphasize more how a follower will be punished, or that a follower won't get rewarded if his or her behavior doesn't change. In short, they emphasize the consequences of making a mistake. This emphasis will clearly lead followers to focus on avoiding punishment and problems. This is clearly a prevention focus. In conclusion, it is important to understand that one focus is not necessarily better than the other one. For a designer who works in a field where a lot of innovation is needed, a promotion focus is probably better. In contrast, a prevention focus, which causes people to work more cautiously and produce higher quality work, might be very appropriate for a job like a surgeon, for example. The main point of the research, though, is that the actions of leaders can greatly influence whether people approach a situation with more of a promotion focus or more of a prevention focus.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test. In the Ielts test, you would now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet.